Kelly Davis, your host of the Untold Miracles podcast, and today we have a true legend on the show. Known as the Iron Man, he is an American icon and World Series champion who played 21 seasons in Major League Baseball for the Baltimore Orioles. He was a 19-time All-Star, 8-time Silver Slugger, 2-time Golden Glove winner, 2-time AL MVP who had 3,184 hits, 421 home runs, and holds the record for the most consecutive games played with 2,632, breaking Lou Gehrig's streak that stood for 56 years. He was inducted into the Baseball Hall of Fame in 2007 and is considered one of the best shortstops and third basemen in baseball history. He's a baseball analyst, best-selling author, speaker, president of Ripken Baseball, and co-founder of the Cal Ripken Sr. Foundation. He's been active in charity work throughout his career, and he has impacted the lives of millions of kids through the game of baseball. Please welcome to the podcast, Mr. Cal Ripken Jr.
Yeah, thanks so much. I was sitting there listening to you. The realization hit me that the longer you're away from something you did, you can become an icon and a legend. So thank you for taking me down memory lane.
Oh, it was so fun to do. I mean, I was a fan of you and have been a fan of you, but just to read it and do all the research, it's like unbelievable the way that you've changed the game of baseball. And so I'm just so excited and honored to have your time today, and thanks for being a guest. You've been around the game of baseball your entire life. Your dad was a player and coach who played 37 seasons with the Orioles, and I actually heard you say that your dad didn't miss a day of work in 31 years.
No, I mean, the reason this streak all happened was because I was trying to live up to my dad's standards, actually. And he was someone that was tough, and when he committed to something, he did it, and he was there every day. So that principle just carried over. I didn't think there was any way that I would play all those games in a row. I just wanted to be an everyday player by definition in my dad's mind.
How old were you when you remember picking up the bat?
Well, my dad was in minor league baseball. He was the manager of the minor league baseball for the first 14 years of my life. So as far back as I can remember, I've been in and around the game of baseball at the minor league level. So I had a glove in my hand. You know, I had my earliest memory and a bat. And I had a chance to witness a lot of people having fun, you know, playing the game of baseball. And I thought that was the ideal job.
Well, your dad was always teaching you life lessons through the game. What lesson do you remember learning as a young child?
Wow. You know, I just went through the process of writing another book. And it forces you to think about all the things that your dad had taught you, or how your parents had influence over you. So we identified a whole bunch of them, and we talked about a whole bunch of them. But if I was to whittle it down, one of the most important things, and one that I espouse to my son who's trying to go through the minor leagues now, is don't worry about measuring yourself against somebody else. I mean, we all do that naturally to know that whether we can compete at any level. And probably in business as well, you look around and say, okay, can I play in the big game? But don't measure yourself against somebody else's talent. Try to be the best that you can be. Like my brother Billy and I were different players. I was 6'4", 225. I could hit the ball out of the ballpark a little bit more frequently. Billy was smaller, more agile, could play multiple positions. And he could move the ball all around the field, and he could contribute in a big way in his own way. So I think if I was trying to give advice or one big lesson, you have a responsibility to compete against yourself first and try to be the best person that you can be, and then apply that to your game.
Well, you were drafted at 17 years old. You reached the major leagues in the 81 season, got the AL Rookie of the Year. Tell me what it felt like to be called up to the big leagues and play that first game.
Well, it's the greatest feeling you ever have when the manager tells you you're going to the big leagues. You're going to the show. And there's many funny stories about that where managers try to deceive you about why they're calling you in the office, only to give you the good news. I don't have one of those stories. My manager, with great pride, after a game in Syracuse, I came back to Rochester. It was late at night, and he called me into his office, and he goes, you're going to the big leagues tomorrow. You know, congratulations. So I still get a chill that runs down the back of my spine just telling you that story. And so I got up really early, got in the car and drove to Baltimore. It took about 6 hours from Rochester, New York. And that started my my big league career. But it's all the work that you put in. And you don't know if you're going to make it at that point. You know that you've done everything that you can to get that call. But then the next step is one of the biggest steps. So I was really happy, but there was a lot of work cut out in front of me.
Well, you started as third baseman, then you shifted to shortstop. Tell me why you made that move.
It wasn't by choice. My manager, Earl Weaver, decided that we'd be a better team if he placed me at shortstop. And it was interesting. I was signed as a shortstop/pitcher. And I think most of the people that drafted me was more interested in me being a pitcher than a regular player. But since I was local or in and around Baltimore, there was a scout by the name of Dick Bowie that saw me play more than some of the other scouts. And he saw the potential in me as a regular player. And so when I went into the minor leagues, shortstop, the speed of the game, and, I wasn't fully developed at the time. I was having difficulty at shortstop, and I was growing very fast. And we had an injury, and they moved me to third. And so I instantly started doing really well at third when I made a move over, so people thought I was just a third baseman. And then once I got to the big leagues, got my feet on the ground, and became more mature, when Earl moved me back over to short, again, I was 6'4", 225. And most people thought, well, he's too big to play shortstop.
Yeah, I was going to say, that's crazy.
Yeah, and so, but I went over there upon his direction, and he said, don't try to be anybody else. Just catch the ball and throw the ball to first base. And I felt really comfortable going back to shortstop, and it allowed me to use my baseball acumen, my eyes, and my knowledge of situational baseball and anticipation to really add that to the position. And Earl paid me the biggest compliment anybody could ever pay. We didn't win the pennant that year in the first year in '82. We missed it by one game. We had the last game of the season against the Milwaukee Brewers, and we were both tied with the same record. So whoever won that game went on to the playoffs. We lost that game, and Earl Weaver said to a reporter, he said, if I would have moved Cal to shortstop earlier, we would have won the pennant.
Wow.
So that was a pretty good compliment.
I want to talk about 1991. It was a pretty amazing year for you. You were All-Star MVP, won the Home Run Derby, Golden Glove, second-time AL MVP. What do you think made that season so special for you?
I wish I had a real definitive answer for you. It was kind of interesting. I was 31 years old then, and I had success, Rookie of the Year MVP in my first 2 years. We won the World Series. And then we went through a rebuilding process that was kind of painful with the Orioles, which included losing the first 21 games of the season in '88, having my dad fired from being the manager in the first 6. And so it was almost like you're looking to as a rebirth of what was going on. So 91, I changed a few things in my stance. Frank Robinson helped me a little bit in my my approach. Worked on it really hard in the off season, but I think mentally and physically things just came back together again, and I was able to have a season virtually where you don't have a slump, and that's so rare that you can go through a 162-game season and claim that you didn't have any extended period of a slump or a slow period.
I mean, just reading all those stats, I'm like, that's incredible. It's like lightning striking. It's kind of crazy, but you did the hard work, and I think that's a big important part of it. I want to talk about September 6th, 1995. It was a historical and monumental day. We addressed it earlier, this streak. You broke Lou Gehrig's record, and there was a 22-minute break to honor you. President Clinton was there, Joe DiMaggio was there, and you were actually sick that day. Tell me about that experience.
Well, I had a little bit of a fever. I don't know how sick. I didn't go to a doctor and they say, this is what you have. But I was a little run down and had a summer cold or something, and I had a fever. And I remember never feeling any pressure by playing baseball as far as whether I could play or not, because my approach was if there was a game today, I was coming to the ballpark ready to play, and if the manager chose you to play, you just played. And the streak was a accumulation of those daily decisions. But as we got closer to the record and people started planning this celebration, all of a sudden I felt that there was a finish line. And I was thinking, God, I don't like this feeling. I mean, I never did this to try to get to a certain point, but all of a sudden now there's a finish line. And the tying game, I was feeling a little under the weather. And then once that happened and the game was over, it felt like it was almost a foregone conclusion that it would happen, the next day, that you would show up and everything would go that way. And I remember getting up early, taking my daughter to school. It was her first day of school. And I wasn't feeling real well. Didn't get much sleep. I went to bed really late from the tying game. Got up, took her to school, went back and tried to take a nap, but I couldn't. And I still felt like, I was sweating and had a little bit of a fever. But I got to the ballpark. I got a renewed sense of energy. The adrenaline kicked back in again. We played really well as a team. I played really well as an individual. And we won the game, and the celebration, the 22-minute celebration happened in the middle of the game, which was a lot of people ask me, what was the most special moment you had as a player? And I look at it in two ways. One is I caught the last out of the World Series in '83, and that feeling cannot be paralleled. I mean, when you get a feeling like that, it's a sense of accomplishment. It's a sense of fulfillment. It's part of your dream to win the World Series, and so that feeling is all by itself. But the human moment, the human element that happened at the halfway through the game in the fifth inning in September 6, 1995, where you had a chance to celebrate with your little family and have that break in the middle of the game. That was a pretty darn special personal moment.
I mean, I can't even imagine. It's known in baseball as one of the most memorable moments in the game. Tell me, was there a moment or game where you didn't think that you would be able to show up?
There was a bunch of close calls with injuries, and I would never say that there was. I did miss a game with a high fever in my first year in '82, early in the season. I remember going to Chicago, and I was really sick at that point, and then the manager decided not to play me in that game. That was really, really early, and I wasn't swinging the bat too well, so it could have been a combination of both those things. But the injuries, it's interesting to me, is that we all deal with injuries, and I will say that if you're a professional baseball player, the only time you're 100% is when you come to spring training. Because the nature of playing every single day, you're worn down a little bit. Sometimes you get bumps and bruises. And the fact that you're doing it every day, every player, whether you play 100 games or you play 162 games, you're a little banged up. You're a little nicked up. So you learn to deal with that. Mm-hmm. And I think in my particular sense, because of my dad, I pushed the envelope a little bit more. Because of the expectations of my dad. And I was able to find out sometimes when you had an injury that you might want to sit down for and say, okay, I can't possibly play. I found if I pushed myself through there, I did better. And it was really an odd sort of feeling because your expectations go down, your concentration goes up a little bit to protect whatever the injury is. I'll give you an example. I hyperextended my elbow on a slide into second base. And then when I went to take my next at bat, I was swinging in the on-deck circle, and it really hurt just to take an easy swing. And I forced myself to go to the plate, waved at the first pitch in the dirt, without much focus or concentration, and it really hurt to the point where the trainer had to come out and say, what's wrong? And I told him what I did, and I said, well, I'm okay. Let me try it again. So this time I focused on getting a good pitch to hit, and I hit a line drive at the second baseman. And when I was running to first base, I was going to be out. But as I was running to first base, the realization hit me, when you swing and miss, it really hurts. When you make good contact, it doesn't. So I got hotter than I ever been in my career, I think because my focus was elevated to protect my injury. And I really swung the bat really well, and that included power and all that. So in my mind, I always thought that there was a silver lining into a nagging injury that I couldn't find out about unless I forced my way through.
You retired at 41 and played your last game October 6, 2001. Tell me about the emotions of that day.
I'll tell you what, the emotions of the whole last part of the season. I announced my retirement in June. We were going to go through another rebuilding process as a team, and that can be exhausting. I felt I had a little bit of it left in the tank, and I wanted to find out how much. But when all that occurred, I realized this was going to be my last season. So when I announced it, it wasn't for the purpose of getting a farewell tour. But that's what happened. Everybody was saying goodbye to you every time you went into a city for the last time. And you tried to give as much as you could to that city that you were leaving for the last time. So the accumulation of that feeling started to wear on you as the season went on. But also, during my last season, we had a baseball interruption in the form of 9/11. 9/11 happened. And the emotions that everybody felt on the baseball side when we resumed play was a little overwhelming as well. I got a chance to meet a lot of kids who had lost their fathers at Yankee Stadium, that last trip through Yankee Stadium. And I kept thinking, how are they going to get through, their lives without their dad? And I kept thinking about how my son would get, because a lot of the kids I met were the same age as my son. And so that emotion was wearing on you, with the emotion of saying goodbye to the fans and then just trying to do your best and trying to play. So by the time I got to the last game of the season in Camden Yards, I was pretty worn out emotionally and physically. But there was still a great excitement that was generated by our home crowd saying goodbye for the last time. And I was able to address the crowd at the end of the game and put a few of my feelings into words. But we try to play the game of baseball controlling your emotions so that you can be consistent. And in this particular time, the emotions, it was a little more overwhelming in a good way. And so I was glad that I had that experience to say goodbye.
Cal, as you referenced earlier, you just published a book, Just Show Up, mm-hmm. which you explained that it's more than just showing up. We get to meet the challenges of the day. Tell me more about that book.
Yeah, it's interesting. I had the good fortune to get into the writing books because of this record. And everybody wanted to know about your life story in an autobiographical sense. And I like the process of doing books. And so I think that was about my 12th or 13th book. Mm-hmm. This past one, Just Show Up. Mm-hmm. There's a kids series and there's some other books as well. But this one was more, what did you learn in baseball that applies to what you're doing now in business? And I've had enough business success. Our kids' youth organization is the leading youth organization in the country. Our foundation, named after my dad, has had great success, National Foundation. We just opened our 84th field in different parts of the country. We're all over the country. Our programming and our fields are there. So the success in those two areas, have allowed me to understand business a little bit better and then kind of speak back and forth between baseball and business. And the purpose of the book was just to share your experiences. And it's not to say this is how you need to do it. Here's the diagram on how you can be successful, because I don't think that way. There's basic principles and values that I applied in baseball that I also apply in business, and I try to articulate those principles and for the benefit of sharing. And hopefully it's a good read. It's a fast read because you don't want to make it overly complicated. You want to support your principles and with good family stories. And I was able to do that, and very proud of the book. And we've had a good time promoting it, and it's been received very well.
Well, I want to talk about Cal Ripken Baseball. As you mentioned, it's a leading American youth baseball organization, and you teach the Ripken way, which is perseverance, integrity, and unwavering commitment to be and do your best. And you teach values of the game, 9 values, 9 innings. I want you to talk about those 9 values and maybe which value was maybe one of the hardest for you to learn. Some things are easier than others.
Some of these different things, the 9 values and 9 innings and all that, is a way to make them stand out. But I look at those, as your basic framework, your basic fundamentals. And it was all about Dad's teaching and Dad's understanding. Dad was a very analytical guy, and he was always curious about how things were done. And he always believed that things should be done, the right way. If it's worth doing, it's worth doing right. He would tell us all the time. So instead of, I laugh when some of the when the information or the content is shaped in ways that actually make it stand out. I'm thinking to myself, it's just a good basic framework of how you do things. So I'm trying to think, where do I want to go with that question? Because I can go in many different areas.
Well, I'll just say the 9 values are perseverance, integrity, fun, passion, commitment, team, community, family, character.
Yeah, I mean, it's. I think character is tested a lot in the book, and this chapter I really, really enjoyed talking about was playing fair. So how do you define playing fair? Because we have rules in the game, and then we also know we have unwritten rules in the game. There's a structure of the game that you're supposed to play by, and you're supposed to be a good sport about, but it doesn't cover everything. So how do you deal with things that's not covered in sports? That's okay, it's legal, it's not against the rules, and you could exploit those to your own advantage in competition. But what is fair to you? You know, what is okay for you? What is it's a struggle for what is right or wrong with you. And so a little thing like baseball is known for stealing signs, right? So you're on second base. You've earned your right to get to second base because you've got a double. And now you're looking in at the catcher's signs, and they're using a sequence code to give your signs so you can't tell what they are, so you can deliver them to the hitter. But since I was a middle infielder and you could watch very carefully, I could readily pick those signs up, and I could transfer that to the hitter. But I thought that was wrong. I thought that was a violation of the spirit of competition. The pitcher is trying to face the hitter in a fair way, and to have the second baseman the guy on second base give you the signs because he figured it out, I thought that was the wrong way to go about doing things. And so it was my character or my integrity that says, okay, I'm not doing that. And sometimes you had to stand up against your own teammates, to do that, because I would tell you that the majority of people in the league think that that's okay.
I was just going to ask you that. I'm like, I wonder how many people are doing that today.
They see it as a competitive advantage, and you're competing at the highest level, but I didn't look at it that way. So if you really look at how it could extend out, and we've seen these things, the Boston Red Sox got reprimanded for using an Apple Watch. They would watch the signs on TV, send a message to a trainer who had an Apple Watch on the rail of the dugout, and that person would do something which would communicate what pitch was coming to the hitter. And so you can see how it can be stretched out, and that is against the rules, and so they were reprimanded. But if that's against the rules, why would we allow the other stuff to happen? So yeah. I was different in regard to those sort of things. One of the things that Dad, I love to say in this too, Dad said the hidden ball trick is something that should never be in professional baseball. Now, as a kid, the hidden ball trick is kind of a funny thing to do, and it results in an out, and you get excited about it. So when I came to the big leagues, I couldn't understand that. But it is a matter of character and integrity and how you compete. Is that when they try to do it in the big leagues, I will tell you, you could have success once, and then people will look at you, and the word will spread around that you're not someone to be trusted. He's that kind of competitor. So I remember the first time it happened on the field. Our second baseman was trying to set up the hidden ball trick after a double, and I looked at him for a minute. He faked the throw back to the pitcher and held onto the ball. And so the way it was supposed to work is when the guy got off the bag, not knowing where the baseball was, the second baseman would throw it to me, shortstop standing next to him. I'd catch it and tag him out real quick. But what I did, I didn't like it. I didn't like what was developing, so I told the second baseman, or told the guy on second base, I said, look, the second baseman has the ball. Don't get off the base. And he kind of looked at me with a puzzled look like, why are you telling me this? And I'm going, it's just there's no place for that in the game. And so eventually it's foiled, and it's revealed that the second baseman had the ball. And then the guy on second base turns around and looks at me as shortstop while standing on the base, and he says, thank you. Now, if you think about that, I had gained some trust in the form of a spirit of competition where I'm not trying to embarrass another person on the other side. We're trying to compete and play a game. But I will tell you that had a lot of advantages, that when people came to second base and you would just talk baseball with them, they would share baseball things with you that sometimes would help you. And so I don't see anything wrong with that sort of a relationship. It's how you choose to conduct yourself, it's how you choose to play, what you think are the boundaries of right and wrong, and what is playing fair to you. I think that says a lot about who you are and what your character is.
Speedway has supported Children's Miracle Network hospitals year-round since 1991 and has raised more than $109 million to fuel miracles for kids treated at 61 CMN hospitals. This month, Speedway will host their largest ever miracle tournament to help raise awareness for the ongoing needs of children's hospitals. 43 miracle families will come together to share their touching stories with their local communities and raise funds for each of their children's hospitals. He's been active in charity work throughout his career, and he has impacted the lives of millions of kids through the game of baseball. Mr. Cal Ripken Jr.
Thank you for taking me down memory lane. Thank you.
You just opened on May 28th your 84th Youth Development Park, which I think is so incredible because these aren't cheap parks. They're $1 to $2 million. They could be more, I'm not sure. I can't even imagine the impact that you're making on these kids' lives and what that feels like.
I'll give you the feeling is absolutely great, and it tells us that we're doing the right thing. So the parks, the youth development parks average, about $1 million, $1.2 million per field. Mm-hmm. And so you can already tell by doing the math really quickly and say there's 84 fields that we've raised a lot of money and we built a lot of fields. But we started in that business to help kids, and we used baseball to help kids, and we did it through our programming and matching mentors with these kids that didn't have all the same support networks that a lot of us do. And we were having great success, but we found that there weren't safe places to play. There weren't safe places in those areas. So we got in the business of building these youth development parks, which essentially are outdoor safe classrooms. And the community, because they're so nice and because they last and they're virtually maintenance-free, they stay that way. And the community embraces that and then protects that for the kids in those areas. Mm. And so we've been very proud of being able to impact kids that way. My brother Bill, who's also very active in the foundation, our dad's foundation, he says it really simply. He goes, kids are being pulled in all different directions and in negative directions or bad directions in some of these areas, and they don't have the support networks to guide them. So if you can picture a kid walking down the street and a gang element is trying to pull you over there to do, bad things, and then you look to your right and you see this beautiful field, you have a choice. You're at an intersection to say, okay, do I go that way? And or do I go over here and pick the field? And Billy says, we believe that the kids will pick that field every single time. And once we get them over to the field, we can start to show them some of the values of sport, which we all know are pretty obvious. There's the individual responsibility and the individual work, but there's also understanding how to work as a team. And those two things alone are a good starting point for a lot of these kids.
You've impacted millions of kids, but I'd like to know if you could share a personal story of just one child who's been impacted from the foundation.
Yeah, the last child that knew me really well, she was pulled in the wrong direction, did some drugs, got in trouble, got arrested. But it was our programs that brought her back. And then she started to become a mentor in those programs for other kids, which I thought was just a wonderful story. And we're at a point now we've impacted kids in many ways, but now we want to impact kids in a deeper way. So we want to get them through high school if we can, and then all of a sudden after high school, you say, what's next? Well, college is next, and then maybe helping them get a job would be next. So we were very proud to give this particular girl a full scholarship to go to college. And she was so happy and so grateful, but she did it herself. She was responsible for herself, but then she took it one more step and recognized that other kids, she could be a model for other kids. And so she's exponentially helped a lot of kids in her area just by her example. So that's a wonderful story, and so we're going to continue to watch her in college.
I love it. Well, I have some quick fire questions for you before we end. If there's one word you want to be used to describe your legacy, what would that be?
I was asked that question a ton of times at the end of my baseball career. How do you want to be remembered? Mm-hmm. And at that point, you're thinking, however, just to be remembered at all is pretty good. That you did something. But I guess if somebody were to describe me, I would think one of the biggest compliments that you could have is that he was a gamer. And what gamer meant in the everyday sense is that you're part of a team. And you're coming to meet a challenge today, whether it's Nolan Ryan or Randy Johnson or Roger Clemens, you're trying to meet that challenge today. And being a gamer is that you're willing each and every day to meet that challenge. You come there and you're ready to go. Even though you might be slumping, things might be a little off in your personal life, or you might be a little hurt, you might be a little banged up. But if you're considered a gamer, you're going to give it a go. And I loved it when somebody referred to me as a gamer.
What's your favorite part of game day?
Here's what I used to like, and I started to realize this towards the end of my career, is when you play every single day, you kind of get used to the environment of people being there. But when you first arrive at the ballpark, especially at home, you arrive early enough where the stadium's quiet. And so then many times if you want a little bit of a peaceful view, I go out and sit in the dugout and enjoy the quiet of the field. And then as you start to do your work and start to get ready for the game, they open the gates and the ballpark starts to come alive. So obviously, when you're in the middle of a game and you have an exciting moment, and it's intense and everybody knows it's intense and it's on you, those are the moments that you really thrive and you really remember. And I've failed in those moments and I've succeeded in those moments, but the thrill of being in those moments with people providing that extra energy is really cool.
Who is the player that you least like to face at bat from shortstop?
It's funny. I probably can answer that question more in a fear sense about when you play in the hot corner. Sometimes they would want you to come in and play closer because a real powerful hitter might lay down a bunt. Like Dave Winfield one time tied for the league lead in batting average, I think. He had 340 or 343. But he was the most feared guy from the hot corner because he could hit the ball harder than anybody else coming down there. So you almost want to look in the dugout when the manager's saying, hey, don't give him the bunt. And I'm thinking, why not? Let me stay back here where it's safe. But there were a few players like Winfield and Kirby Puckett. Alex Rodriguez was one that really could hit the ball on a low line drive with a lot of backspin. And so he can handcuff the shortstop even though you're standing a little further away, just like a third baseman could be handcuffed. But the shortstop is generally not thought of as the hot corner. But there were guys like that could turn it into a hot space.
It's been 20 years since your dad died. What do you miss the most about him?
I miss the security of being able to come to him when I need him. And it's kind of weird in a way. Dad raised you to kind of go off on your own, and I've been pretty independent since I left the house. But there were times when you needed some direction, and Dad was so analytical, and he could break things down, and he could be calm about it. And those are the moments that you wish that you had his ear and that you could hear his advice. But I will tell you that strange as it is, he's been gone 20 years. When I get into those moments where I wish that I had him, it almost seems like his voice comes into my head and starts to give me the answer. It almost seems like he's there looking out for me all the time. And I'm sure that it's because he embedded in me all the things that he thinks about. So there are times when I look in the mirror now, I'll be 50, how old will I be this year? 59. And I look in the mirror sometimes in a low light situation and I look up and it almost seems like I have Dad staring back at me.
What's your favorite ballpark outside of Oriole Park?
Yankee Stadium is a great place to play when you're good and they're good. And I've been on both sides of that. When we first came up to the big leagues, we were pretty good, and the Yankees weren't so good. And so that wasn't an exciting environment. And then I've been there when they were really good and we were not. And you definitely don't want to be there then. But if you're good and they're good, and you're playing in a series in September where the pennant's on the line, there was no better, more exciting place to play and compete in than that place. Fenway Park is a really cool museum experience. I got a chance to play in Wrigley Field one time. So those ballparks are iconic. And the thing that I love most about those ballparks is that in the history of baseball, you had that ballpark in common with a lot of players. We did the 1999. They did the All-Century team. I think Kevin Costner announced the All-Century team on the field at the All-Star game in Boston and Fenway. And just to look out and see all the players that were there standing around the infield, you realize that that we had this field in common, and that felt really good.
Who was your favorite player as a kid?
That's pretty easy. Brooks Robinson was my favored.
What advice do you have for kids who have a dream to play in Major League Baseball?
Well, I mean, your goal should try to be develop and be the best you can be, which means you got to apply yourself. It doesn't mean that you can't do anything else in life but play baseball, because you have a lot going on when you're a kid. But if you really want it, then you're thinking in your mind that I'm going to go for it, and you start to go for it at an early age. The sad part about it is that no matter how bad you want it, if you don't have the talent to do it, you'll wash out at some level. But give it a try, learn, adjust, and be the best that you can be, and see where that puts you.
Cal, you are a father to a son and a daughter. What do you enjoy most about being a dad?
I think I enjoy all the stages. You have different parents, and I used to ask questions of some of my teammates that were ahead of me that had kids that were older. And I would ask them about the different stages. And I thought that one of the interesting comments came from Tim Hewlett when he said, I look at my kids as they have a running videotape rolling at all times. And he said, I started to think about it, and I'd say, who do I want on that tape? Do I want me on that tape, or do I want somebody else? And that was referring to watching your kids and all that kind of stuff. But I've been hands-on with the kids since they were young. I mean, you change diapers, you take them there, you clean up their mess, they throw up on your shoulder, all those things, you bathe them. I wanted to be a part of every aspect of that stages. And I've found over the years, now my daughter will be 30 this year, my son will be 26, but I still find it fascinating that they're adults and they're carving out their own lives. But the stages that you're in is that they still need you in some ways. And I'm enjoying the fact that they're getting out on their own. So I do enjoy all the stages of their development. I just enjoy being there and being in that role for them.
Cal, you're known in the clubhouse and just in life as being a leader. What's your definition of a leader?
That is interesting. I think there's some false leaders that happen in our society. Sometimes we focus on the guy that waves a towel in the dugout, and tries to get the crowd into the ball game, and then you would put a label on him as being a leader. I never looked at that as leader. That's more like being a cheerleader. A leader is more of someone that knows the direction, knows the answers, and you can provide help. And I would say that the best way that is to preserve someone from being embarrassed by when you're trying to give help. I mean, there's constructive criticism. There's advice that you can give. And I think the most sensitive part of leadership is to try to teach someone something or give them something and not make it a negative experience. So, for example, the guy doesn't run out of ball to first base. And you look at him and the fly ball lands in the infield, and he doesn't get to second base, or sometimes he gets thrown out at first. And you want to say the easiest thing in the world is for you to run. It doesn't take any skill for you to run. You got to run that ball out. And somebody will meet him at the top step of the dugout and say something to him. And at that point, they feel bad. And then the people in the stands are seeing you yell at him or somebody else in your team yell at him that he should run. And that doesn't provide any leadership to me. I think the way I would handle that, and I have done that in the past, is just wait until you have a moment where he's calmed down and you're in the weight room or you're in the training room, and it's just you two. And you say, hey, I know it's hard. We do it. We all do it. But what happened to you is if the ball lands, it looks bad for you. It looks bad for all of us. So you really got to run. And I think many times if you approach it that way, it's a much more meaningful lesson because you're looking out for them. You're not really leading maybe to get attention for yourself.
I love that.
I think the first and foremost part of leadership is that you have to have something to give. And sometimes I believe that leaders, they don't have to proclaim that they're leaders. It just happens.
Cal, what is something that most people just would not know about you?
Well, one of the most surprising things that people say is when we're talking about food is that I like to cook. I like to go to the grocery store. I like to pick out things to cook. I like to experiment in the kitchen.
Is this a recent thing? Or?
Well, during the 21 seasons, you could do it at home, but it wasn't something that you could do as a regular basis because the baseball took you away so often that you had to make choices of your time. So, yeah, it's a more recent thing. More recently, I now live on the water. At the end of my pier, I put down crab pots, and so you catch crabs. And so I've eaten crabs around Maryland all my life, but I never caught them. And so catching them and then and preparing them and cooking them, I've had a great deal of fun doing that. And basically there's three elements of that you're steaming your crabs in, or that that there's the water that you're using, there's a vinegar, and there's a beer. But you can play with the beer and the vinegar types, and then there's the seasoning that you put in. And so beyond that, it's not a whole lot. But I found that you could do an organic apple vinegar, or maybe you do a thicker a darker beer that has a caramel flavor to it, and you start to change the flavor of the crabs. And so I've had a good time doing all that. So I like to cook.
So can we say your next book is going to be a cooking book? You've got kids' books. You could do a cooking book.
Yeah, I don't know. What would be the angle? What would be the angle for that?
There's probably some life lessons from cooking.
Oh, I'm sure there is. In baking, I know that you have to be a little bit more exact in your measurements. In regular cooking, you have a lot more latitude in your recipes, which I tend not to like to bake, but I like to cook.
Okay, Cal, my last question. What is the motto that you like to live by?
I think that changes as you live life. I will tell you, 59, there's a little bit more urgency to do what you want to do. And although I did what I want to do to play baseball at that time, but now you're starting to think there's an urgency that comes over you that there's a limited time that you're on this earth. And what are the things, how do I want to spend my time, and who do I want to spend my time with? So I'm a whole lot more choosier now in those decisions. I'm busy and I run around a lot, and sometimes I'm pretty sure I say yes too much still. But it makes me feel like I'm doing something. But at this stage of my life, I'm getting a little pickier and asking myself when I make choices, do I do them more for the fun and the experience of it? Probably. So maybe you're moving more towards the retirement choices and less about. Although I have a lot ahead of me in our work business. I'd like to scale our kids' business, but I think your perspective changed a little bit. How you choose your free time and who you spend your free time with.
Well, I love the fact that do what you want to do, and I love that for you, what you want to do is giving back and impacting the lives of as I mentioned before, millions and millions of kids who otherwise wouldn't have the opportunity because they are in these underprivileged and unsafe communities. And I just think it's so amazing what you do. And I just want to thank you so much for your time today. I was talking to a colleague that used to work here, and he said back in 1993, he'd reached out to you trying to get some signed memorabilia for Children's Miracle Network hospitals, and you actually personally called back and supported our cause. I'm like, oh, that's amazing, because he had a lot going on during that time, but the fact that you made the call, not your manager, not your agent. So we're grateful for your support of Children's Miracle Network hospitals. I just want to thank you so much for your time today. It's truly such an honor to talk to you. I learned so much from you. I know our listeners will as well, and I hope you have an amazing day.
Thanks. I enjoyed it very much. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Audrey, 2019 National Champion for Children's Miracle Network Hospitals. Kids like me deserve every chance to heal. At your local CMN hospital, they get the best hope for a miracle by getting the best possible care. Every day, CMN hospitals are giving kids like me the chance to talk, walk, smile, and laugh again, to get better and get back to being kids. And you can help too. Give now at childrensmiraclenetworkhospitals.org and put your money where the miracles are. Thank you.